Great. So we are live and recording this meeting, and we'll give folks a few more minutes to get into the room, and we'll get started likely in the next 3 to 4 minutes. Let's see, Monica. Yeah, here's you have the list of folks. Do a good job. Welcome, Monica. Like I couldn't hear you because you're on mute, but I could see by your smile that you're excited to be here.
Always.
Bring that energy. We love it. While we're waiting to get started, if you could change your name to identify yourself as an EJC member, that'd be great. And we'll give 2 more minutes and then we'll start. I'll do some of the housekeeping stuff and we'll welcome folks in slowly but surely as we get going. Welcome, Amandra. Welcome, Laura.
Hello.
Good to see you both. As I keep reminding folks, if you could change your name while we're slowly working our way in to identify yourself as an EJC member, that'd be great. Hey, Lauren, welcome. Ravi, hello, welcome.
Hello.
And then we have Angela's note taker in the attendees list. Could you raise your hand if you're an EJC note or EJC member? And then we'll promote you. I saw that, Monica. You raised your hand. So Angela's note taker, if you're paying attention, hearing us, if you're a member of the EJC, just raise your hand, we'll promote you. Otherwise, we'll keep you in the audience. Welcome, Anna. Okay, well, we're at 3:34, so why don't we kick us off? So welcome to meeting 5 of the Environmental Justice Coalition. Great to see folks be in space again. So I'm going to work through some of our housekeeping and then we'll do some introductions and dive into our content. So before we can go to the next slide. Just as a reminder, this work is funded by the Washington's Climate Commitment Act. So we'll hold our appreciation for the resources that make this work possible. Jenna, do you want to add any opening thoughts? Can we go to the next slide for welcome or any of the team from Clark County?
Nothing yet. I think we can wait till our project updates.
Okay, great, thank you. So let's welcome each other. Let's do some introductions, remind ourselves who's in the room. As a reminder, you do have a number of folks from the Clark County staff. You have some of our consultant team members who are in the room, but let's introduce the folks that are here today. I'll go in the order of my screen. As a reminder, Ben Duncan, he, him pronouns, with Currents of West, your facilitator for today. Jenna, you're in my top corner. I'll call on you first.
Hi, everyone. Jenna Kay, I use she, her pronouns, Clark County project manager for this project.
Great, thank you. Amy?
Hello, everyone. I'm Amy Koski. I am with the Clark County Public Health Department and also a member of the project team for the climate project.
Thank you. Grant?
Hey everyone, Grant Simmons, he, him. I'm here as project support. Please reach out to me if you have any tech needs during this meeting.
Great, thank you, Grant. Tracy?
Hi, Tracy Lunsford, she, her pronouns. I'm the project manager from Parametrics on the consultant side for this project.
It just so happens people are in that order on my screen, but I'm going to just stick with the non-EJC members. Let's go, Dana.
Hey everyone, Dana Hellman, she, her. I'm with Kappa Strategies and we're working on the resilience sub-element.
Thank you. Nicole?
Hi everyone, my name is Nicole Matilde, use she, her pronouns. I'm on the Kearns and West team supporting this process.
And Lauren?
Hi, Lauren Henriksen with Public Health.
Great, thanks. So let's now shift to our EJC members. Min?
Yeah, my name is Min Pham. I'm the president of the Vietnamese community of Clark County.
Great to have you, Min. Abby?
Hi, everyone. I'm Abby. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here with Odyssey World International.
Thank you. Monica?
Hello, everyone. I'm Monica Zazueta. I am with Vancouver Metro LULAC, council number 4706, pronouns she, her. Great to see everyone.
Great to see you, Monica. Thank you. Laura?
Hey everyone, Laura Ellsworth, she, her pronouns. I'm with Council for the Homeless and on the EJC.
Thank you. Tabby?
Hi everybody, I'm Tavi. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with iUrban team for the EJC.
Great. Thank you. Josh?
Hi folks, Josh Jones, Partners in Careers, our Director of Programming, he, him pronouns.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Hi everybody, this is Rebecca. I'm with the Free Clinic of Southwest Washington, and I'm on the EJC.
Thank you. Almendra?
Hello everyone, Almendra Velasquez with Fourth Paying Forward, EJC member.
Thank you. Anna?
Hello everyone, Ana Betancourt Macias here with Latino Leadership Northwest, she, her, ella, EJC member.
All right, thank you. Lika?
Hi everyone, Lika Smith with Pacific Islander Health Board, EJC, and I'm also representing Alana, who is out with due to a car accident.
Right, thank you. And then Gabriella, I know you were on the move, but are you able, where did Gabriella go?
Yes,
Oh,
I
there you go.
can. So, hi, this is Gabriela Mendoza Ewing with Hispanic Disability Support Southwest Washington, Pastos Gigantes, and my pronouns are she, her, ella, member of the EJC, and I'll be joining in my computer in a few minutes, so sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you.
Yep. All right, thank you. Did we get everybody? Looks like we did. Okay, well, great. Let's go next slide. So there's a couple things that we'll be working through today. So one is that we've created some space. There's a couple pieces in our agenda. One that we utilized last time for announcements. So we did create some space for EJC members to share things happening that you would see as relevant and as of interest to your fellow coalition members. But we're also created some space to have you all, as you've been out and starting your engagement, to give some updates or share some highlights, some learnings, some reflections of what you're seeing and hearing as you've been engaging folks in your communities. We'll get an update from Dana, continuing the conversation on the resilience sub-element goals. And then we're going to return to a conversation that we started our last meeting, really building off some really great feedback that you all provided with some revisions to the equity and environmental justice lens. So that's our hope as we move through. And if we kind of look more specifically at our agenda at the next slide, we'll get some project updates from the team. So Grant, if you can, yep, there you go. We'll get some project updates from the team, EJC announcements, reflection on engagement, as I just named, resilience goals. We'll take a break. And then we'll come and spend the bulk of our remaining time on the conversation around the equity and environmental justice lens. And then, as we always do for every meeting, create space for public comment. And then we'll do some wrap up, next steps, get you out of here by 6:30 at the latest. And then just a little more housekeeping. So just as we if you go to the next slide. So EJC members, as a reminder, you're joined as panelists. Those of you who are joining as members of the public are as attendees, so you're not able to engage directly in our discussions and conversations. We do ask that folks stay on mute as much as possible when you're not speaking, to join on video if you're able to. Again, trying to recreate the spirit of being in person together and in community. You can use your raise hand button, which does say raise hand on the bottom of your screen to get into the queue. As you all know, you can also use your human hand as a method to indicate or come off mute, and I'll assume that that's that you would like to contribute to the conversation. As Grant mentioned earlier, you can email Grant or chat Grant during this conversation, and he can help resolve any technical issues. As we've asked folks to do, to identify yourself with pronouns if you choose to share, and at least identify yourself as a member of the EJC. And then, of course, we're here for several hours. We have built in a break, but let's take care of ourselves as we spend this time together. So we can go to the next slide. And just as a reminder, for the public, the reactions have been disabled, but for those here raising hands, you have a button there. And then we have enabled closed captions. So if that's helpful for your participation, you can click on the CC button or show captions at the bottom of your screen, and that will give you captions as we have our conversation. And then next slide, and I'll be brief with this because I found this group to be just really, really great at creating and sharing space with each other. But again, we do create agendas with intention, and so honoring the agenda, striving to stay on the topic that we're discussing, balancing the space and time with each other, trying to identify things at the earliest point in the process. This is a quick moving process overall. So the earlier that we can name issues, concerns, ideas, concepts, et cetera, is helpful. For all of the consultant team and the Clark County team as we do the work. We do want you to focus on the substance. We can respond to and address issues and questions. And you all bring a lot of different expertise and experience. And so really seeking to learn and understand each other as we have our conversations is a powerful mechanism for us to do our best work, speaking with respect. And then, of course, we try not to bring substantive communication into the chat, but rather bring it into the room. Gabrielle, I see you have a hand raised.
I'm sorry, I just joined in my computer and I don't know if I went into the main meeting room or the participants or the to be part of the group. That's why I raised my hand.
Oh, well, you are in our group, and we welcome you back. So thanks for coming back into the space. Thank you, Gabriella. Let's keep going. So for members of the public, we will ask you, we do have public comment at every one of our meetings towards the end of our time together. If you are here and wish to provide public input to this body, you can raise your hand now and we'll note that and ensure that you have space at the end of the meeting. We'll also make sure that we do an announcement later on as well. It's incredibly welcome. We appreciate hearing from folks, and we do build this at every conversation. So while the bulk of our time together is focused on the EJC members and deliberation discussion with each other, certainly this is an important part of our structure. So again, raise your hand if you're interested in providing that. We will set time limits. Our ground rules are applicable to our public commenters as well. You also can provide written input. The email is on the slide. We can, and it's comp.plan@clark.wa.gov, or submit comments online at clark.wa.gov/community-planning/comp-plan-comments. This is all online and referenced in meeting materials. Not seeing any hands now, just members of the public. We will be sure to reopen the public comment period when we get to that part of our agenda. So you'll have another opportunity to provide input. Jude, before we keep going, do you want to say hello, introduce yourself, welcome? If you're talking to us, Jude, you're on mute. Or we'll come back to Jude. Okay. Well, Jude's here. We see your image. Okay. Well, let's keep going. So one of the things we do at each of our meetings is to approve the meeting summary, and really as form of approval, we just asked if there was any edits or corrections or changes to the meeting summary from our previous conversation. So I'll just pause. Okay. Not seeing any changes, we'll consider the meeting summary good to go. And with that, we're going to move into project updates. Jenna, I'll pass it to you. See Jenna pointing. Figuring out sound.
Okay, you should be able to hear me now.
We got you. We got you.
Okay. All right, sorry about that. Hi, everyone. Sorry, now my computer is doing weird things. Okay, I'm just going to go through my list of project updates for the day. So I wanted to remind you all that in your meeting materials, we are now including comments from EJC members since the last meeting that they've sent by email, as well as any public comments we've received since your last meeting. So those were in your meeting packet. Also wanted to give a few updates on other meetings that are happening related to this project. So just as an FYI, and if you're interested, you're welcome to attend any of these or share this information with other people who may be interested. So our Planning Commission, we have been giving them updates on this project. We gave them an update on May 16th, and then we'll be talking to them again on June 20th. That's to keep them in the loop on what we're up to. Similarly, we keep our county council updated on this project, and so we have a work session with them this Wednesday on June 5th to give them an update, particularly on the resilience work that where we are at so far to date with that. So these work session type meetings with either the county council or planning commission, you're welcome to listen in. There isn't a public comment portion, but it can be interesting to hear the questions that these groups are asking. And they get recorded too if you ever want to watch the recording. Let's see. The county project team, we are going to host a community workshop related to resilience on Saturday, June 22nd from 9 to 11 a.m. And I think a news release, it may have just gone out or is about to on this. So we're starting to share information about this event. So please feel free to share it with anyone you know who might be interested. You're welcome to attend yourself as well, but no obligation either. So just wanted to share that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention related to our overall comprehensive planning project is there is a comment period open until 5 p.m. on June 5th, so it's closing soon. And that is on, people can submit comments related to the environmental impact statement, scoping of that for the comp plan project. So that means any comments you want to make related to potential impacts from updating the county's comprehensive plan that should be considered, that you can submit comments on that until June 5th. So just wanted to relay that. Okay, some other updates. We have Amy, Lauren, and I have really enjoyed reading the updates that you all have been providing. I'm going to pause here. Are other people seeing a whiteboard showing up on the screen? Is that just me? I think so.
My bad. I was trying to take notes.
Oh, okay. That's interesting that's, anyway, no worries. Just making sure it wasn't something I was doing. So, okay. Okay, so I want to talk about first phase of engagement. We have, Lauren, Amy, and I have really enjoyed reading the project reports you all have been sharing with us. And we have some time on today's agenda for you all to share a bit more about how it's been going. So we'll talk more about that soon. And logistically, we were thinking that we could, us on the county team could follow up from today's debrief on how it's been going and start to draft a summary of all of the feedback you all have been collecting so that we could then share it back with you all at your next meeting in July. Make sure that the summary is actually capturing what it needs to capture. And then we would keep updating the summary as you all continue to do your engagement events over the next several months. So just wanted to give you a heads up, that's what we were thinking. And I thought I'd pause to see if that sounds okay, or if anyone has any concerns with that approach of us kind of compiling what you all are sharing and then sharing back with you to make sure that that summary is an accurate reflection of what you are sharing. Any concerns with that approach?
I see a thumbs up from Monica, so I was wondering, in case any concerns, any thoughts, reflections? Okay, for my math, I see 100% of the thumbs that were up were in support.
All right.
Okay.
That sounds good, and we'll try it out, and then you all can let us know if it's if it's helpful or not at our next meeting. I also wanted to talk about the next phase of engagement. We sent out some phase 2 engagement questions after the last meeting, and thank you to those of you who provided us with some feedback. So we've revised them again based on that feedback and sent out that updated version as part of this meeting's materials. And there's both a version and track change that shows the changes since the last version, as well as a cleaned up version that's a little bit easier to read. If any of you want to spend more time looking at those and giving us any additional feedback on that next batch of questions, we were thinking Monday, June 10th. So next Monday would be a good due date for any additional comments on those. And then we can do one more round of revisions so that we can then finalize them and get them out for translation. And then keeping in mind that you all can also adapt them however you want for your for the work that you are doing. So if we go with that approach, we would have a set of sort of the next batch of questions ready to go sometime the week of June 10th in English. And then we would probably have the translated versions available the week of June 17th. So I wanted to double check if anybody needs those questions sooner than that, because we could crunch the timing and rush some of that if we needed to. So I just wanted to pause and see if translated versions by the end of the week of the 17th, if anyone has any issues with that timing.
Yeah, Gabriella?
Yes, thank you. I actually spoke with Lauren. I think it was last week. Sorry, the days are blending right now.
Recently, Gabriella, that's fine.
So I was trying to have a QR code for the questionnaire to share at the food event, the food box event that will now be Mercado Fresco. But the questions come up only as a PDF, not as a fillable online survey. So I wonder what could I do for that, because I was planning to do that this upcoming Saturday.
Yeah.
And because I can do that only in Spanish and English, so I could do that, but we have people that speak Russian, Ukrainian, Vietnamese is already there, but I wouldn't be able to have the link. I see only the like the online. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Gabrielle, we still have the online versions, but we can get those to you. We can get you the links if were you thinking of using the same questions that you've been using with your other? Okay, yeah, we can get you the links for that for this weekend, so you can do a QR code.
Lauren, did you want to jump in?
I was just going to say, Gabriella, I'm sure you haven't had a chance. I emailed you about this just a bit ago, so you and I can touch base offline and set something up for you.
Awesome, thank you. Also, I want to mention that of the surveys we have done, not all of them reflect on the page that we have, the SurveyMonkey. So because I have somebody assigned only to that to keep track of how many people get their surveys, because we're doing gift card raffles as a thank you for filling up the survey. So right now we have about 45 people that done the survey, and on the SurveyMonkey shows up only 18. So I was wondering why is that happening?
Yeah, Gabrielle, let Amy, Lauren, and I will double check, because I think we can see your SurveyMonkey too, so we can follow up with you on that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good questions, Gabrielle, and I imagine the problem solving that happens with the QR code, I imagine might be useful for other folks in the future as well. Thanks for naming it. Any other?
Okay, I had just
Jenna.
I was going to say I had just a few other updates, if that's okay.
Yep.
I was going to say with the next batch of questions, our plan was going to be to translate it to the same languages we did the last batch, which ended up being, I think, almost 10 languages, because we had some requests for some additional Pacific Island languages. So we were going to do the same languages we did for the last questions. If that doesn't work for you, please let us know. If also by the 10th, I think that would be helpful for us, because that's what we need to know to send it out for translation. Okay, so I had, let's see, one other main thing. We've been looking at the schedule for this group, and we realized that this group is next scheduled to meet on July 1st, and we know some people are going to be away on that date. And so in our email for this meeting, we were wondering if July 8th might be an alternate possible date for this group to meet in July. So we were thinking after our break today, we might do a quick poll to see if there's a preference for either of those dates. So you all can look at your calendars during our break, and then we can check in on that to see if we should stick with our July 1 date or if we should try to move it a week later in the month of July. So we will follow up with you all later in the meeting, and hopefully you can have a chance to look at a calendar quickly during our break. And then also just a heads up, I think your September meeting is on the same day as Labor Day. So we are thinking that we'll probably skip meeting in September if that works for everybody. So those are just some scheduling items, and I think I'm going to stop there.
Great, thanks, Jenna. Any questions before we move on? Okay, so just as a reminder, we'll check our calendars and come back after the break with dates. If we don't land on something that seems to work for the majority of the group, we'll do some follow-up, but we'll continue that conversation later. So let's move to the next part of our agenda. So this is, again, responsive to what you all named as a good opportunity to just create some space for announcements from the group. Just as a reminder, we all are going to create some space after this to reflect on engagement work. So you will have a chance to talk about things that you're doing and things that are upcoming. But any announcements that folks want to bring into the room? Yeah, Abby.
I wanted to shout out for Odyssey World. We have our Juneteenth Freedom Celebration in Esther Short Park on June 15th. So EJC members who want to table at that event, you still can. And then if not, just bring your friends and family and have a good time there. And then we're also doing a survey table. So we'll have space for the EJC survey. And then if other organizations have materials for upcoming engagement opportunities that they want to leave there, they can do so as well.
That's great, Abby. Any questions about that event or opportunity? Okay, I assume, Abby, if folks can follow up with you directly?
Yes, you can follow with me directly and I'll point you to the person you need.
Perfect, thank you. Any other announcements for EJC? Tavi is expressing excitement. Appreciate that. Yeah, Monica.
I just wanted to ask if we could like send our flyers or things that we have created for the events, if we could send it to the group and then maybe they could share it out as well with their circles and their contacts. Would that be an okay idea?
I was wondering about that, Monica. Likely depends on people's printing capabilities, but I guess I would open it up to the group, right? So Abby's your example, right? If folks had materials they wanted to share, I don't want to put you on the spot, particularly for Odyssey International, but just generally speaking, how do folks feel, or do folks have capabilities to print? Like if you were just to get a PDF of a flyer or something like that, is that what you were thinking, Monica? Or?
Well, I didn't even think about that one, but yeah, that's another idea. Mine was more like social media, like outreach people. Like what, how I do it is if it's downloadable, I download it and share it out like that. But if it's not, I take my screenshot and then edit it, and then share it out, via social media. But I mean, that's just, just sharing our events and everything, I think would be helpful for everyone, and if they can't make it to one, then maybe they can make it to another one, just having the option out there. So,
yeah,
but that'd be flyers too, but not asking that. That's more work for other people.
No, well, thank you for clearing that. And then I guess, yeah, Jenna, do you want to jump in, or someone from Clark County, around like how could, for that example, like a link to a social media post or information that we'd want to get out to the entire group?
Yeah, so I think because we have to deal with the Open Public Meetings Act, if there's anything you want to share, if you can send it to us at the county, we can then forward it out to the group. We just need to avoid the majority of you, like communicating with each other on the side. So I think we are happy to be a pass-through if that works for you.
That's great. And then I see a couple supportive comments around sharing on social media. So that's a mechanism to go through the county to ensure that gets shared, so you all stay above board. That's great. Good suggestion, Monica. Thank you. Any other announcements? Okay. Well, again, we'll create this space at every one of our agendas and utilize it to in whatever way that feels best for you all. So let's move to the next part of our agenda. So we created this space. Now y'all been out there doing work, as you heard reflected back. Jenna and Amy, Lauren, others that have had the chance to kind of see your progress reports are excited to be able to experience that through your reflection. And we wanted to bring some of that into the room today. So you don't have to read your progress report. That's not what I'm asking. But if there are reflections on engagement that you all have had. So this might be really a chance to just acknowledge the work that you all have done, maybe some of the things that you're hearing, seeing, experiencing, feeling, and just a chance to give some voice to the work that y'all are doing. So I don't know if we want to just do a round robin, or if folks just want to jump in and speak to what you're learning, what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you're feeling. Yeah, Monica, jump in. Just get us started.
Cool. So I just had my first event on May 25th. And I was so happy with it. I got to be in community one one thing that one person said there was her name, Meridian. She's like, it was so nice in the beginning where there was no agenda and we were just talking. We were just getting to know each other. And that was the first part of my event, was the Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation Healing Circle. And I played a video of how the racism was on the stand, and this lawyer destroys racism by saying we're all from a tribe in Africa. We just, migrated out, and the melanin in our skin is the reason why we are different colors. And like where the sun we'd get more darker if it was hotter, and then less and lighter if it was, we didn't need much sun protection. So that was really cool to play that video. And then we just had stories of awe. Like that was one of the questions, like, give us a moment of awe in your life. And mine was when my kiddos were born, when I went skydiving, and when I saw Cirque du Soleil. And so those were just best moments that in my life. I mean, kiddos number one. And it's just, we all just went around the circle and shared that. And so that was really great. And then the next part was the introduction to donut economics, where I shared a 9-minute video on what donut economics is. And people were really interested in that. And when I said they were going to get a free digital copy of the book, they were like, oh, great. Yeah. And so that was really cool to share that with them. And then then we did the surveys, and it was, I had 100% participation, because when they heard there was a prize, they're like, yay, we want to, be in getting that prize or whatever, but also giving input. One thing that I did get a comment on was that there was nothing in there about like what are they called? Strollers. When women want to go out and, go out strolling with their baby, bicycle riding. This man was like, I walk, and there was nothing in this about what happened to me and my outdoor activities. And so he was like, I would like to see more of that, like outdoor activities and how it impacted me on that. But it was just really great. It was getting my feet wet for this first event. And so I was just getting ready for it, and it was a lot to get ready for. And so now for the second and third events, I am doing way more outreach. I'm actually going to go to different events and just talk with people one-on-one first, and then invite them. Because I don't want to come off as like, hey, I need you to do something for me. Like, I want to get to know people so that they actually feel like this is the community that they want to share the information with. Like, I feel we all have this fear of each other, and what are they going to say? What are they going to do? But it's like, okay, how about we get to know human beings first, and then be like, okay, now let's get to work. So yeah, I just wanted to say it was great. It made me smile so much. And I was just really happy that my friends, family, and activist family were there. So yeah, I really encourage everyone to come the second time or the third time. Next one is July 20th. And then it's at the Fourth Plane Forward Commons from 11 to 3, free food and dancing. And then next one after that is September 7th. So yes, that's all I had. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Monica. And just for giving so much life to the power of relationship. I love the framing of awe. What a wonderful way to start it. And then incorporating, right, these really, kind of educational pieces, visionary pieces around donut economics and thinking about deconstructing race and racism. So thank you for sharing. That's a great modeling for the type of enthusiasm I think we're hoping to hear from folks and reflections on what you are taking away. Laura, jump in.
Yeah, so I conducted some community engagement outreach among 3 groups of folks. One was homeless service providers across the continuum of care through an online survey. And we did get a pretty good representation of ages that people served, ranged from under 12 all the way to 65 and older. The survey respondents reported that the primary race and ethnicity of the people that they serve are about 50% white, 50% BIPOC, and the zip codes most impacted or primary to the people they serve the most were 98660, 661, and 663. As far as the impacts of severe weather on the folks that they served. The biggest problem was really cold weather. That was one of our categories. We had really cold, really hot, and heavy rain and smoke, wildfire smoke. But so that was the most kind of listed across categories of impact, followed by heavy rain, and then followed by really hot weather. What was nice is that we were able to figure or to kind of gauge how each type of, like, what area of impact each type of extreme weather affected people. So really cold weather was most harmful for problems related to mental, emotional, or spiritual health, followed very closely by physical health problems or injuries. Heavy rain caused the most damage to shelter or property, and really hot weather caused the most problems related to mental, emotional, or spiritual health, followed very closely by physical health problems or injuries. So probably none of that's like shocking news, but also just good to kind of get that information. Commonly listed barriers to coping with severe weather for people, as far as from the service provider perspective, were lack of warming and cooling shelters, difficulty getting into those shelters and staying in those shelters, finding and accessing food, a lack of access to transportation, and existing health conditions and disability. And then as far as preparedness goes, service providers generally felt that their participants were somewhat prepared. There was a well-prepared category, but no one chose that. And then there were a number that just felt like the participants were not well prepared or were just unsure. So that was kind of the service provider perspective. Then I also talked with folks who are in emergency shelter. I talked to like long-term or more year-round emergency shelter. So I talked to two residents of two locations. And I think the bottom line there is that, you know, in sort of preparation for extreme weather, just like any of us, you know, stocking up on supplies and really just trying to, like, if it's going to be really hot, trying to find ways to get cool. And if it's going to be really cold, making sure that they have ways to stay warm. And then if it's like wildfire smoke, looking to get their indoor air clean through air filters or N95 masks. This one was another one where we had a good mix demographically. We had 45% of respondents being Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders, 2 Keys specifically, and then 27 were white, and then 13% were 2 or more races. We had 66% female, 33% male, about a little over half English speaking, and a little under half who spoke 2 Keys primarily, and a little over half experiencing a disability or preferring not to say. So yeah, and then the biggest problem again was snow or ice, and extreme heat, and then a somewhat significant amount put all of them as far as the choices of severe weather. So, and then lastly, I spoke to folks living unsheltered, and I talked to people mainly outside of share house, and again, we had a good mix. They were ranged from age 18 to 64. But 60% of those really were in the 40 to 64 age range. We had a good racial mix with 60% of respondents being white, 20% Latino, Hispanic, 10% Black, and 10% Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. 90% were male, 10% female, and about 50-50 experience a disability or preferred not to say. For those folks, the type of severe weather that caused the biggest hardship was snow or ice, then followed by extreme heat. But it was like 62% listed snow or ice as their biggest issue. Preparation, just really trying to get into shelter, getting items to stay warm, hygiene and sanitation. Same with severe heat and smoke. You know, the biggest barriers to accessing resources for them mostly were, you know, lack of money, transportation, time, and just not enough resources out there. And we asked some questions around shelter, emergency shelter qualities and services that might make people more willing to go into shelter during extreme weather, convenient and easy to get to, privacy, safety and security, allowing pets and belongings, and available charging stations for devices were all reasons, are all things listed that would make going into emergency shelter more attractive to folks. Again, really just appreciated the opportunity to get out and talk to folks, and interesting to get the perspective of people experiencing homelessness in different ways, and what kind of severe weather caused the most issues, and what what they did to prepare that was slightly different across populations, and then of course things that would help all of them across the community.
Well, thank you for that, Laura. It's a powerful reflection. And I know you said it, some of this was not surprising, but I think naming it in the way that you did, and we'll come back to this when we talk about the equity and environmental justice lens around how different populations are kind of uniquely positioned in their experience of hazard or harm or vulnerability or risk. And you did just a really powerful job of naming that. But also just jumping out around just that no one responded to feeling well prepared, right? Is kind of a, I'm seeing exclamation points around that, but also an opportunity as we think more broadly around what are some of the strategies that we'll need to employ as a community. So thank you for that sharing. Let's go, Rebecca, and then Abby.
And if I could just clarify that not prepared was the service provider's characterization. That was not the characterization from the people experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, thank you for that clarity. I was hearing that, right? Our system is not prepared, right? Which is in some ways even more startling. Rebecca?
Yeah, thanks. So we did 2 focus groups in the last couple of weeks, and I was actually really pleased with kind of our choice to go with focus groups over some of the other sort of mediums for gathering information. They were just really fruitful and super interesting for, I think, all of the staff who participated and the participants. I don't think this is a topic that people really, we found that once you brought up the topics, they were really interested to sort of mold over and realize, this is impacting me in a lot of ways. And I think it was just kind of a really interesting exercise for everybody that this is impactful, and I just don't really have the time to ever think about it. And so giving them the space to think about it and just kind of in its own right was really interesting. Couple things that I think stood out, we did amongst both focus groups, so they didn't participate at the same time, but separately they came to a lot of similar takeaways, which is that no one felt particularly prepared, and a lot of the reason for that was just sort of the chaos of day-to-day life, and a lot of folks are living paycheck to paycheck and not really having the bandwidth to focus on things that might happen. There was a lot of time spent talking about that. And then also just sort of the constraints of our current infrastructure and people's housing came up a lot, which is, it's really hot outside, but the unit that I'm renting, they don't allow me to put in certain types of wall AC units. That came up a lot, which is I just really can't do anything about it because so-and-so says that I can't. They might have the resources to purchase it, but they can't put it in because someone says you can't, cut a hole in the wall or whatever it is. So there were a lot of constraints around that. And then just the rising cost of electricity. People are having to make really hard choices. Do I buy food or do I turn the heat on? And so there was just some really insightful things. I really enjoyed doing it, and I'm looking forward to doing another round in the summer. Thanks.
I love it. I love a good focus group, Rebecca, as you can imagine. But no, I appreciate you naming, right, some of the barriers that, again, may emerge in some of the ways we think about an equity lens as we have that conversation, and just recognizing what gets in the way of folks being able to thrive in their space or to be safe. And and then the idea of what gets in the way of preparedness, and I think you named it pretty explicitly. Abby, jump in.
Yeah, thank you. So back in the end of April, we did some surveys at our Women's Supporting Women Friendship Tea fundraiser. So we got 21 responses from women, pretty split bag in terms of demographics and race and ethnicity. But some common themes that came up were that severe weather was impacting their ability to just leave their house and get to work or school. They also talked about severe weather impacting their health and safety. And then in terms of challenges that made it hard to cope with severe weather, many of them participated having difficulty paying for energy bills, and many of them also indicated having difficulty paying for housing generally. And then with that preparedness, most participants felt that they were either not well prepared or somewhat prepared, so not a lot of I guess, optimism in being prepared for these weather events in the future. But then most recently, which again, to echo that the focus groups are just so fantastic, was we did a focus group with students at Fort Vancouver High School working with our Vancouver Public School interns. It was 18 kids, mostly BIPOC students. And they were just really great with really thoughtful and intelligent things to say. But some common themes from them were they talked a lot about the financial cost of these extreme weather events, like their parents not being able to get to work in icy weather and roads not being cleared fast enough on their side streets. And then they also talked about not having AC and kind of like the creative ways that they'd come up with to stay cool. And they also, a few of them talked about the weather and having to stay home from school kind of impacting their mental health, having to not, if they're not able to get to school, which might be kind of a safe space for them. But they also had some ideas about what's the word I'm trying to say? Sending out some PSAs to more vulnerable populations ahead of time. A lot of them were really worried about houseless people knowing when severe weather events were coming, and then also elderly people being able to prepare in time to help themselves stay cool. Specifically, they talked about hot weather a lot. But yeah, that's kind of the highlight reel from that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so much, is coming up from, some of our previous conversations. And I think almost all of you have mentioned kind of physical, spiritual, and mental health. A lot of you have talked about some of the barriers, and I love the kind of juxtaposition between naming barriers and things that prevent preparedness with the vision for what is needed and what is possible. So I really appreciate that. And of course, I love the voices of young people showing up in these conversations. Any other folks want to reflect? Gabriella, please.
Yes, thank you. I would like to give some feedback about the gathering that we hosted at the beginning of May. And we had about 45 to 50 people attending that event. And little by little, the answers started to trickle in. We asked for participants to show us the last picture of the survey when they finished, to be sure that they answered the survey and that we kept track of who gave the answers. And the majority of the answers that everybody has mentioned about all the weather, but mostly the cold weather, because the lack of being able to go outside to get food and to go to medical appointments. That was a big one for us because our families have, well, usually any medical appointment takes probably about a month or two to be scheduled. For people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, sometimes those appointments are as far as 3 months, sometimes 6 months. So when some of these appointments happen and they don't have the access to get out to go to their scheduled appointment that they're waiting for probably 6 months or longer. So that's a big issue. So that was a lot of, they shared the concern and the stress that they had when this happened. We had a few families that went through that in the last frozen weather that we had. And mental health issues was a big one because children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities they have their routine. So if their routine is going for walks to a park, because that's the only thing that calms them down, even if it's raining, they go out for walks. But when it's icy, there's no possibility of going out. And more if the roads, the main roads are the ones that are clean, but no, like the driveway in apartment complexes, or even the sidewalk in the apartment complex to get out of their place. And so mental health issue was a big one for the smoky weather. We had a lot of individuals with asthma, laryngitis, croup and asthma that reported issues with even having all the windows closed because the smoke kept coming into their units because the windows that they have are outdated and the apartment complexes don't answer to those requests because for them it's not a concern because they think, well, there is a window and it's not broken, you know. But if they have cracks on the aluminum or whatever the window's made out of, they don't consider that as an emergency health issue. But for families, you know, obviously that was a big concern. And and also some of the feedback that we received was some of the families that we have participate in community gardens to grow their own food because they want to consume food that is more natural without chemicals. But due to the weather conditions during the hot season and sometimes the lack of access to water to water their crops, then they could not grow the food. And we had actually a pretty good number of families that did that. So that was a big concern. And now with warmer weather, they're concerned what's going to happen because buying these foods in the store, organic food, is very expensive to where they cannot do that. And that's why they rather grow in their like boxes in their backyard or rent a little space in a community garden, things like that. So those are some of the feedback we received. And also, like I mentioned, the ice season was probably the most impacted because not being able to walk outside. And some of our individuals, even if they don't use a wheelchair, their stability to walk is very compromised to where they need to use like a walker or some other device, and or like if their feet are not well cemented on the ground. Some individuals with Down syndrome present some issues in their skeleton in their body, so then that's another issue. So anyways, so yeah, like I mentioned before, we had about 45 surveys so far, and we continue working in this, and we're about to launch our social media campaign, and we will also be helping people that come to our table in Juneteenth. So we'll be there also, Abby, doing that. So yeah, that's some of the feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriela. And just it's really just seeing how much, you know, one, just all the ways you all are naming the consequences of climate impacts, but also just how much is overlapping while being very specific, right? Like, so you're seeing these overlapping, I mean, you know, people talking about cold weather in a lot of different ways, but it's hitting and experienced in very different ways depending on the population. And I just love that you're giving such life to that. Anna, jump in, please.
Thank you. I don't have the results yet. I'm doing the last push this Wednesday with my Skyview group that I work with. The big push that we did was during our annual car show at Fort Vancouver High School. I did receive maybe like 3 folks saying that the survey was too long. I'm not you know, at the end of the day, we let them know that it is important information and that it is unfortunate that they think it was too long because, again, this is information that is needed for, you know, everyone's well-being. Anyways, we did have some students not know what was the difference between the county and then the city, because we're also working with the city. They're doing some work with the youth regarding climate justice. So we did have to do a little bit of explanation about that. Some students had to take it home to ask their parents. They didn't know whether they could afford, you know, AC. Some of them, though, and I'm doing a lot of you guys' comments. They couldn't afford the AC during the summer. They couldn't afford a lot of the things that, you know, that are needed for their well-being during ice storms or during heat waves. So I have seen a lot of that going around within the group of students that we worked with. We've also had a discussion on preparedness. And that's another thing that they also had to speak to their parents regarding if they had a preparedness plan. A lot of them did not. Some of them, I would say maybe 2 or 3 that we talked to, knew what it was, and maybe 1 or 2 their parents did have a plan. Most of them did not. So we did talk a little bit about, you know, preparedness. Why is it important? And overall, I think the students that we worked with were left with a lot of great information. And then hopefully by the end of this week, I'll be requesting the results to see a little bit more in depth of the responses that we got.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Sana, and appreciate the work we're doing with young folks. And just, you know, one of the things that came up in our last conversation, and we'll reflect back on this later, was, you know, ensuring that we're really analyzing and thinking about the financial impacts, and it's woven through a lot of your conversations, not just as you know, a barrier, right, but just something that is of real critical importance, right? Not just the financial, you know, what prevents you from doing, but what you lose when you can't get to work or can't access, right, these necessary resources. So looking forward to you know, hearing more when you've done some more analysis. And we got time maybe for one more share. I imagine we'll create this space. So again, just really you all giving life to the work that you're doing. It's such a critical part of this overall project. But anyone else want to share before we move on to our next topic? Yeah, Almandra, please.
Yeah, I say that when I do the surveys each time, it just kind of you know, it's sad to see that all these strengths that like add up for our vulnerable communities, folks that already have a hard time accessing healthcare, folks that already have a hard time doing basic needs for their car, you know, getting healthy food. And then on top of that, you know, you have a hard time just going outside and, you know, even going to work. And so like at the bare minimum, like we just hope that we can at least provide sheltering and safety for our community. So that's just my reflection on these surveys.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. And maybe that's we'll wrap it at that and just allow ourselves to kind of sit in that reality, right? That, you know, one of the powerful aspects of what all of you bring into this space is a reminder of what you just described, right? That we're talking about folks that on a day-to-day, right, are trying to overcome all of these kind of systemic and structural barriers, and then it just gets compounded, right, when we see these type of natural events that just make it even that much harder. And so, you know, I just appreciate, you know, the work that you all are doing kind of every day, and of course in this particular project to make sure that those experiences, those lives are showing up really clearly. And maybe that's a good segue, right? As we think about kind of the work that the advisory group's doing and Dana and her team are doing to kind of take these broader goals and think about resilience and policies that can hopefully, right, as we go through this process together, really reflect back and respond to the realities of so many of the communities that you all have just given voice to and vision of. So thank you for that sharing. I'm super excited to have you all continue that work. So with that, Dana, I'm going to pass it to you.
Thanks, Ben. All right. Hi again, everyone. Thanks so much for sharing all that. That was really valuable, wonderful information. So, yeah, let's jump into resilience goals here. We're not going to do any brainstorming or feedback on the resilience goals and policies today, but I just wanted to share a quick update about what the technical team has been working on related to goals and policies and what's going to be coming up for this group as well as the CAG in the next few months. Next slide, please. Okay, so this may look familiar. We'll just run back through this and orient everyone to where we are in this process. So a couple months ago, we kicked off this goal and policy list development process by asking the CAG to brainstorm some resilience goals within those 11 sectors that were provided by Department of Commerce. And then if you all recall, in our last EJC meeting, we shared with you some of the main themes that came out of that CAG brainstorm, and you provided some additional input and helped to expand on those goals. And so what happened since then is that the CAPA team has been working behind the scenes as well as with county staff and other consultants to try to come up with some good goal and policy matches that we can move forward with in creating this draft list. And we did create a draft list, which we took to the CAG in the May meeting just a couple weeks ago. And I'm going to share the process that kind of led to the development of that draft list. So now we're in the midst of sort of an iterative process here between CAPA and the CAG. We're going to have at least 2 rounds of feedback with the CAG to make sure that we're filling in any gaps and representing CAG priorities, and that the draft goal and policy list gets to a place where it feels, at least somewhat complete in its draft form. And while that's all going on, we know that this group is still continuing to bring in community engagement results, which we certainly want to reflect in the goal and policy list as well eventually. So we're still in this back and forth with the CAG, but in the near future, hopefully in the next month or two, we'll have a list of goals and policies to bring here to the EJC for your further review and feedback, and helping us make sure that we are incorporating that community engagement perspective, that we're meeting all of the equity requirements for this project. And we'll ask you to help us evaluate some of those goals and policies through the equity lens, which I believe we'll be talking about more later in today's meeting and developing that. So that's what's coming up. And then all of us, technical team, stakeholder groups, county staff, will all over the next few months be working on this bigger task of thinking about how to prioritize the goals and policies that we come up with and decide which ones are going to move forward for recommendation to be adopted into the comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. Okay, so quick, hopefully understandable overview of how we got to where we are today. We asked the CAG a couple months back for their suggestions for resilience goals, as I mentioned, and then this group also shared wonderful feedback and input in response to that same question. And what we ended up getting was over 240 comments from the CAG meeting, the last EJC meeting, as well as some ideas that came through email. We had over 240 comments. Those included goal suggestions, and some people got even more ahead of the game and brought us policy suggestions. We also got many specific kind of actions or strategy suggestions as even another kind of step in this process. So even more detailed suggestions than goals or policies, people had begun suggesting specific strategies that we could employ to make these things happen. So we got a lot of really great detailed feedback. And so far have tried to condense those 240 plus comments into where we are now on our draft list. We have 28 draft goals that correspond with 42 draft policies. And this is what we're currently in the process of refining and workshopping with the CAG. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So this is just a snapshot of the goal and policy list as it currently exists. I know this text is tiny and there's lots of it. This isn't meant to be read today. I just wanted to give a quick flash so you all can kind of see what we're working off of at the moment. And if anyone is interested in reading this full goal and policy draft list, you can find this on the CAG website with their materials. So we invite anyone who's interested to take a look there and feel free to read through these. But yeah, that's just a quick look and we'll move on to the next slide, please. So how we got to that list of 28 goals and 42 policies, which I just flashed at you there. We started, as I mentioned, with over 240 comments. And so the first step was just to try to compile those comments into some still pretty broad goal bucket. So we created an initial list of goal ideas by combining comments that were fairly similar in content. And then for each of those goals that we came up with, we attempted to match them with policies from up to 3 different sources. So first, we're looking at existing plans, especially the Clark County Comprehensive Plan and the Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan. We were looking to see if there were any policies out there that had already been adopted by the county that responded well to the goals that you all suggested. So that was step 1, or option 1. The second option was to pull policies from the menu of measures. And for those who aren't familiar, that's a list of mostly policies, also including a few goals that are provided by the Department of Commerce. They've already been vetted by the state, so they haven't been adopted in plans yet, but they have been vetted and they've really been written to be very supportive of the resilience and greenhouse gas sub-elements that we're working on for this project. So we looked there as well. And then the third option for finding policies was to create all new policy language based on things that the CAG and EJC had told us, and kind of applying the language that you all shared to make sure that the goal and policy pairs were reflecting what we heard from you. So after this step, we had each goal matched with up to 3 policies. Next slide, please. And just at the top of this slide here is one example of what a match might look like that had gone through that process I just described. So in the speech bubble there, it says, ensure all public agencies can communicate on the same program or programs. That was a goal that a CAG member suggested within the emergency management sector. And a policy match that we found for that is develop and implement a comprehensive information management system for all fire, law enforcement, emergency responders, general government, and the general population. And that is an existing policy from the Clark County Comprehensive Plan. So that's just one match example. And so that led us into step 3 here, where we still had hundreds of goals, each with up to 3 policies. So we had hundreds of goals and policies still. That's more, unfortunately, than we have capacity to work with. So we did some further condensing of goals from that point, trying to, again, combine things that had similar content focus, combining goals that were addressed by the same types of policies. And the policies that we ultimately brought to the draft list, we hope are the most reflective of all of those 240 comments that we received. Next slide, please. And there's 2 examples here of what this looks like, just to show, again, as I mentioned, we got so much great detailed feedback, and many of the suggestions were kind of beyond the level of goal or policy that we were looking for at this moment, but we wanted to have all those ideas and concerns reflected in the goal and policy language that does show up on that draft list. So just some examples of how your detailed feedback is represented in what's on that draft list. The first 3 bullet points are kind of policy or policy implementation ideas that we received. So incentivize local small farmers to select heat and drought resistant crops, provide resources for farmers to access info and training on climate smart practices, and implement water regulations and practices to help farmers harvest rainwater. Great suggestions. We can't include each of those on the draft list. However, we included this policy example: support conservation programs, research, technical assistance, and resources that provide direct financial assistance to farmers to implement best management practices. So we're hoping that that policy example is, although it's quite broad, can encapsulate all of those specific suggestions that you all made there. And then another example of how some specific goal suggestions ended up in a broader goal statement would be, we had suggestions for pop-up or emergency resilience hubs, public areas where folks can access heat or air conditioning, and a goal that sense of community could be restored after climate events. So the goal that we feel encapsulates those things and leaves space for some other specifics as well would be to establish regular and/or emergency centers where locals can access resources, safe space, and supportive services, and reconnect with others during or after extreme weather. So those are just 2 examples, but something else you can find on the CAG website if you do go to check out their materials is something called the comment tracker, which will show you how each of your detail statements are tied to specific goal and policy examples. So you can find out more about that there. Next slide, please. Okay. And I've sort of touched on some of these topics already, but just to be clear about expectations for this goal and policy list, as we're working through this draft, we really have capacity to analyze about 35 resilience policies and their accompanying goals in great detail. So the draft list that we're currently working with has 42 policies. So we're already a little bit over that 35 goal, but that's kind of our target, is thinking about trying to come up with 35 policies that to the best extent possible cover all of these topics that are interesting for, or relevant for folks. But something to keep in mind as you're reading that draft list, if you do go and take a look at that, is that goal and policy language in this case is going to be fairly broad. And Jenna might want to chime in here to clarify a little bit more about this, but basically the comprehensive plan where these goal and policy language will appear is a policy guide, and the stage of implementation is where some of your really wonderfully detailed suggestions would come into play. So we're trying to kind of keep the line open to those, as someone in the CAG meeting put it, those tactical solutions that you all have suggested, kind of keeping that as a possibility, but the goal and policy language that you see in the draft is going to read as more broad and more general. And last note is that we received some feedback and suggestions that we felt were more appropriate for the greenhouse gas sub-element rather than the resilience sub-element. So those have just been tabled until we get into that other stage a bit later this year. Next slide, please. Okay, last thing here is just a couple of next steps. As I mentioned, we're still working on revising that goal and policy draft list with the CAG. So we're going to continue with that as needed for the next month or 2 months or so. And then when that feels ready, we'll bring it to this group for your review and revisions. And we'll appreciate your evaluation of what we have through the equity lens. And that's all I have. So maybe if we have a few minutes for questions, or I'll just turn it back to you, Ben, if you want to send us on break.
Thanks, Dana. And certainly let's open it up for questions. And then I don't know, because I think where you were just landing around kind of where, like at what level, right, a comprehensive kind of plan or climate element exists. And I wonder, I don't know if it's you or folks from Clark County, right? Like how should this be, this group is going to get some of these, for review, revision as the EJC, and as we have this conversation around the equity and environmental justice lens, right? How would you advise folks to balance kind of the broad and general with enough kind of specific language or at least specific vision to help ensure that implementation, right, that tactical piece that you described kind of pushes towards equity, right? Are there examples or is there guidance as people are looking at this, right? Trying to stay out of the tactical, right? So don't get down to that level. But how should they, I don't know if I'm asking the question all right. Does that make sense? Like, I guess like I want to make sure the EJC folks, as they're kind of looking at policy language, is not saying how would we be doing this, right, on the ground tactically, but ensuring that the language, even if it's broad, is directing the implementation in such a way that the tactics will be achieving the kind of equity values and vision principles, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I can start with a thought, and I think it would be helpful maybe if the county folks want to chime in too, just about that bigger question about like how do goals and policies in the comp plan lead to actions or implementation. But yes, as far as specific language and ensuring that the framing of these goals and policies is suited to our equity goals, that I hope will come through. We've already gotten some feedback about specific language and framing from this group and the CAG, which we've tried to incorporate to date, and we'll definitely open it back up for those kinds of suggestions when the list comes back to the EJC, as we're looking at it through this equity lens. And I think that'll be a good space to have that conversation and make sure that the framing is appropriate and that it is directing focus in the right places.
Jenna or Amy, anything to add?
Yeah, this is Jenna. I can add a little bit. I think when I think about the comprehensive plan, which, I mean, it's a weird document. Like, it's kind of hard to it's hard for me, and I work with it every day. It's pretty hard for me to wrap my head around. Okay, what is this document and what isn't this document? But it really is. It's a policy guide in that it will affect county decisions for the next 20 years. And, you know, those decisions may be specific county projects, right, on how roads and parks get built. It will influence county code, which is our local laws that actually regulate, you know, what you can and can't do in terms of building things or protecting certain areas in the county. And it's going to guide future county programs too. So it has a lot of influence, but it's like at this broad level. So I think, I mean, I don't know if I have great sort of guidance on the how to think about it piece. I think how I keep thinking about it is I want to hear people's feedback, right? No matter what level it's at. And then I think it's kind of like the county and the technical consultant team can think about, okay, how might we shape this into a policy and then share it back to make sure it's got that right level of detail. So I think it's iterative. And I guess I just want to acknowledge it's also complicated. It's just not as straightforward, or it's a little bit tricky just to get to the right level of detail, but we'll want to do the back and forth to get it at a place everyone feels comfortable with.
Good, that's helpful. And then Jude, I see the comments in the chat. I don't know if I don't know the acronym of GMP. I don't know if you want to ask that question, or yeah, Jude, jump in, please.
Growth management plan.
Oh, yeah, that I should know that. So when you see the comments, right? So the impact process with the growth management plan, like how and where does that fall within the realm? And then your other comment was again around not losing then enough details and ensuring that there's enough information and education to ensure that growth management is being impacted by kind of the goals and policies that are laid out here, if I'm interpreting that right, Jude.
Yes, thank you.
So Jenna, are you the resident planner that's going to talk about growth management in relationship to this?
I think so. Yeah, I'll do my best. So there's a few pieces here. So I'm going to take one question at a time. Yeah, so I think we've talked a little bit about the broadness and specificness. The other piece I would add is, and we have this in our comp plan, like in our housing chapter right now, is we might have some more general goal and policy statements, but we can list sort of suggested strategies, you know, that could be, like we have, I think, some different tools on how to share some more specifics and more details in there. So I think we're not quite there yet in terms of where we're at in the project, but I think we can think about our options on how to bring that detail into the plan to help with the implementation that comes after once the comprehensive plan is updated. Let's see. There was also questions around choosing priorities. So I think we're using the word priorities. I think it's we want to make sure we are analyzing policies under consideration in different criteria, and then considering based on that analysis, you know, what should move forward. So we could have, like right now we have 42 policies. It could be all 42 policies end up moving forward. I don't think it's we have to rule them out. I think it's we want to do our due diligence, think through different policies in different ways before a final recommendation moves forward. So it may not be the best choice of words, but that's at least how I'm thinking about the prioritization process. Let's see. And then there was another question around how does the Environmental Justice Coalition intersect with the environmental impact process with the growth management plan or our comp plan update. So let's see, there's a few different ways how it intersects. So so this is going to be the first time. Okay, let me back up. So any comp plan update that the county or in the cities have done since they started doing comprehensive planning in the 1990s, we've had to also follow the state's environmental, the State Environmental Policy Act, also known as SEPA. And that state law, it basically makes counties and cities, we have to consider the environmental impacts of the project that we're working on. So in this case, if we're talking about updating the comprehensive plan, which is at a really high level, right? Comprehensive planning is planning for population growth and which this climate element is a part of, and how to plan for the future of our community for 20 years. We have to weigh the environmental impacts of options on how to grow and develop over time. So that's been something that the county's done, you know, roughly every decade or so as it's updated its comprehensive plan. We are doing it again as part of this update. This is going to be the first time the environmental impact statement is going to address climate. It's never, I don't think it's ever really been analyzed as part of the environmental impact process before. So there will be some analysis on the impacts of different growth options as part of the environmental impact statement work. The other piece is that whatever policies come out of this advisory group process and are recommended for the county's climate chapter also get studied as part of the environmental impact statement process. So they're going to be analyzed as well in there. Okay, so that's just talking about the intersection of our climate work and the environmental impact work for the growth management project. There isn't a The environmental impact statement process is not specifically within the charge of the Environmental Justice Coalition on something you all have to engage with. However, I think we are sharing that information. So if you want to engage in that process and provide comments, you can. So I guess that would have been my short answer, is that there's not a, it's not, it's separate, but there is an overlap. So I'm going to stop talking because now I've been blabbing a while, but glad to talk more either in this meeting or offline too, if that's helpful.
Great, thanks, Jenna. Let's go, Monica, and then if there's no other comments, then we'll take a break and shift to our next part. But Monica, jump in.
I was wondering if this would be then a good time to like add, because we're going to be going on a break, but like I wanted to add a couple things. So would this be a good time to do that right now?
What are you adding? Jump in.
Great, cool. So when Jenna said, this is the county code, it's going to, affect how we're going to build and protect. The first thing I thought was like protect. Well, we need to protect the people and we need to protect the planet. And so I sent you all the background of, Ben, Amy, Jenna. This today was the Vanessa Andriotti podcast on the Great Simplification podcast. And she discusses 4 key denials or socially sanctioned ignorances that we have produced through education. And so I feel that one of these policies, overarching things, is we have to educate people of what we're in denial of. And one of them is the denial of complicity and violence. We deny that our comforts, securities, and enjoyments are subsidized by expropriation, exploitation, and come at the expense of other people and the land. 2, denial of unsustainability. We deny that infinite growth or a growth-based economy cannot be subsidized in the long term on a finite planet. 3, denial of entanglement. We deny that we are a part of the metabolic system of the planet rather than separate entities, and that the planet itself has wisdom that can come through our bodies. And then 4, denial of depth and magnitude of the challenges we face. We have a conditioned desire to look for simple solutions that make us feel good, but don't address the root causes of our predicament. This leaves us unprepared to face issues like climate change and ecological collapse. And so with that, there's a couple of things that I said, and I heard when people were talking about the comments that they were getting back from these surveys. And one of them was, the housing, like they're scared of losing the housing, either it being affordable, them going to work and not being able to pay rent. Well, we need an overarching policy of actual affordable housing. There's this word tossed around of affordable housing that is it's now gone. It's lost its meaning. Like we need to actually say it needs to be actually affordable. The workers need to be paid enough to pay the rent, to pay their bills, to pay the groceries, and that needs to come through in their work. And if they can't be paid that amount of money in order to pay the rent, and then the bosses or the organization or the companies can't survive and live too, then there's something terribly wrong with the system. And so we need to take a hard look at that and say what needs to be healed and changed and fixed. And also, we need to have jobs that help people become more resilient. Some of those jobs could be a mental health counselor, a life coach. I have a life coach like PCAP, a parent and child assistant, where she helps me reach my goals and print a bunch of things out. Disaster response coordinator, community organizer, health educator, nonprofit program director. And it's just actually changing the jobs that we have now and actually have meaningful jobs that will actually get us prepared and pay people for that. Another one is that we only value like wood and things after that we make them into stuff like benches or homes, and we don't value the whole thing, like the tree in the ground and sequestering carbon. We don't value planting more of the things or rewilding our environment. We need to value that, not just the end result of look at my new house. And then with that, going on to the next one is an overarching policy is actually building different types of homes, not just the classic here's wood, here's sheetrock, here's all the things, whatever that you need to make a standard home. There's other types of homes like 3D printed homes and earth ships. Earth ships are where they take used tires and they fill them with freaking sand, and then they make this huge barrier to make one side of the wall, but then they used Coke bottles and beer bottles to make their windows and everything. And then they have a garden inside their home, and they have this AC that runs through their house. And it's just thinking outside the box with things that we already have. And so we don't have to keep on, digging at Mother Earth and saying, okay, here's your new standard cookie cutter house. And so that's another one. So yeah, those were my things I had to say.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Monica. And there's a lot there, of course. And I think it's one of the examples. I think that's going to be both an opportunity and a challenge for this group, right? Is holding, right? Like, what is that goal area, right? I mean, there's, and just even, you probably can't read the slide because it was so small, and you're part of some of the CAG conversations when you think about economic development that kind of improves opportunity access, for example, green jobs, right? And then the tactical elements of what that actually looks like, right? Go down these other pathways. And I think that's one of the lenses, and I use that language somewhat intentionally because we are going to talk about kind of how do we overlay an equity and environmental justice lens to the goal and policies, while also recognizing that there's this whole other body of work to say, what does it mean to have housing that is sustainable, right? What does it mean to have housing that, is going to reduce, carbon emission, that's going to be supportive for resilience, right? You heard folks talk about, right, the quality of housing impacting, Gabriella's stories about people's windows, right? Like, so there's details in, how we ultimately implement and holding it with how do we get goals and policies that speak to some of this broader vision. And so that is going to be a challenge for y'all. I'm not going to, try to pretend that staying at this level when the implementation is so critical to people's lives that you're working with every single day, that's going to be hard to hold some separation for. But I also hope, right, to some of your examples, that we can name goals and name policies in such a way that it creates the vision, right, for implementation that ultimately kind of will serve the folks that you work with and work for and work amongst every single day. So thank you for sharing all that. And I know that, you've been very actively sharing thoughts and ideas with the team and with your colleagues here. So thank you. So with that, I'm gonna just pause for 1 second if there's any other reflections on what Dana presented or some of the conversation we've had. Okay, well, let's take a break. I do see comments. Actually, there's a question. Jude, looking golden policy list from CAG. Are these the tactics? Where's the menus? So I think there's let's I can't digest that in the very moment. Why don't we take our 10 minutes? Let's come back at 5:18, and then team, I'll look to folks to because there's a link there if you want to look through it and just make sure that we get some clarity around tactics versus kind of what's the menu that we're choosing from. So hopefully we can come back to that. So let's take 10 minutes. If that works, we'll come back at 5:18. Thanks all. All right, we're at 5:18. Which means I'll grab a couple more of my Cheez-Its. Get me through every afternoon and evening conversation. So I'm seeing yeah, thank you, Jenna, for moving the comments to chat. You might have to be yeah, and so I think team, Jude, your comments, I'm seeing just around the timing, opportunities for EJC input. I'm gonna ask that our project team kind of takes these comments and really thinks about what those opportunities may be going forward, both in the real time, like now, as things are happening, and being clear going forward. But Jenna, is there anything that you want to add, or can we convene outside? How do you want to address kind of like this need to like ensure that we're not missing opportunities for EJC members to provide input at the right times and places along this kind of rapidly moving continuum?
Yeah, I would say, so I'm available. I am also working on the EIS portion of the comprehensive plan project. So I'm available outside of these meetings if anyone wants to talk more specifically. I think just in short, there is no, well, I can put a link to the official scoping notice document, but there's nothing really to respond to. It's these are comments. If you want to make comments on like, hey, you should be studying this element of the environment, or thinking about, so things you want to be considered strongly in analyzing the impacts of the comprehensive plan update, you should give us comments on that. So there's nothing specific that's on the table yet. It's pretty general to help guide the future analysis. So we did also mention this at your last meeting. We know this is nearing the end of the comment period, so it has been mentioned before. You all also would have gotten the news release around this. So I think as individuals, you all are welcome to participate. I don't think, I get the wanting to collaborate and elevate. I think it's a little bit outside the scope of the purpose of this group, but I also don't want to prevent you all from connecting if you want to connect on it. So then I might need your help on I know we are trying to get to Equity Lens. So
yeah, no, that's fair. Well, certainly there's some information in the chat. That might be something that we're utilizing project updates and EJC announcements for in the future, right? If there are timelines, deadlines for comments on kind of parallel or peripheral processes that are unfolding. So maybe I'll just ask that our kind of project team thinks about how to make it most meaningful. And Jude, keep naming the things as questions arise in the chat. Clarity is good. But I do want to make sure we have some space to move into our next conversation. So I'm going to start with some reflection. So if we can pull up the slide on the, I keep saying equity and environmental justice lens. We haven't changed the slide, but it seems relevant to this group that we use both equity and environmental justice. So take that for what it's worth, that the slide says that. So there was a few things I just wanted to reflect back on, and really this conversation, what I hope for today that we're having is one, just a reflection back to you all, what I believe you, oh, look at that happening in real time. That's very impressive. So I can just say anything and it'll just come up on a slide. We'll do that. Reflecting back, just the input that you all provided, which was really helpful. And so we wanted to reflect some of that back, wanted to talk about kind of the draft that we'd like to put forward to you all to ensure that as we continue to kind of embark on this process together, not just for the EJC, but for the community advisory group, for the Clark County team, for the consultant teams, that we're grounded in the same language around the analysis, right? That we're thinking through as we discuss policies and goals, when we think about, kind of what ultimately will shape this climate element, that we've, I would say, done our due diligence to at least try to filter and describe and name ways that the goals and policy language can ultimately best serve, right, the communities that are really centered in this room. The stories that you all described earlier are the exact type of stories and experiences and structural and systemic challenges that we hope that we can consider as we're kind of moving to develop goals and strategies. And so some of the things that I heard at our last meeting, and certainly I think were reflected in some of the conversations that you all reflected on in terms of your engagement, included things like ensuring that we're asking and considering economic impacts, right? So that financial impact that was really loud and clear in some of the stories shared earlier, that there's a benefit to including goals and policies that serve to build capacity, to build power, right, in communities, right? So some of these pieces, Monica, you named around access to the economic benefits of green jobs, right? Or access to building capacity for preparedness, Laura, in some of your stories. How do we build that capacity in community to do these policies and goals result in more capacity in community? And then you also name things like healing, right? And trauma and re-traumatization, right? Danya, I think you and others shared, right? Having this conversation in relationship to folks whose homes are literally disappearing because of the impacts of climate change, right? That means something. It lands in a very specific place. And how can that inform policies and goals? How do we make sure we're naming it in a way that can inform the process? And, it's not my job to know the answers, right? It's my job to help reflect back, what do you all feel is important as we have these conversations across this entire project? You also named that historical context was important. What do we need to know about the histories of place and of peoples in order to ensure that our policies will work for those who are experiencing not just the kind of overburdened lived experience of so many things that you named, but also heightened vulnerability and the experience of health disparities? How do we ensure that the data that we use and that we analyze is informed not just by who and where that data comes from, but thinking really broadly about the stories and narratives that we often exclude from our consideration of data, right, as we do this work? And then finally, importantly to the work that you all are doing, think to some of the questions that have been raised in the chat. How is community voice, right? How have we included community voice in our process? How have we excluded or not ensured that community voice is informing the work? And so I reflect that back as a starting point, because I think it was really helpful to hear directly from you all to say, like, what are we missing here, right? We started at very high level, people, place, process. What were we missing? So as we go through a few slides, I'm going to just kind of walk through kind of what we brought back in the hopes that it helps reflect and be responsive to what you all named at our last conversation. But before I do that, I want to pause, because that's my reflection back, and hopefully with relative accuracy, it kind of captures the spirit and intent of what you all gave at the last meeting. But I want to pause and just say, is there anything, just at that high level reflection that you didn't hear that maybe you thought was brought in, or if there's something that you want to name that we should be bringing into this conversation? So why don't I pause and just ask if there's any additional thoughts, reflections, or feedback?
you did a good job at saying that back. So thank you. I was just like nodding my head, like, no, yeah, that was, yeah. That's what I remembered too. I just want to add, reaching out to Native communities is absolutely essential, and outreach. We need more people on the ground, knocking doors, inviting, each other to these things, and just really coming back to connection. So thank you, Ben.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Monica. Okay. Well, let's move to the first of several slides that are really the opportunity to start thinking about and reflecting back. And so there's two sides of the slide, right? And the way that we've attempted to structure this really looks at both some guidance, more of a narrative, like why are we asking the questions that we are, which ultimately at the top is the kind of guiding overarching question, some narrative on the left side of the slide that kind of tells the story of the why, and then actually include some additional prompts that really support the analysis or discussion. And before we kind of go into this, I just want to name, like, this is largely a discussion tool for analysis, right? This is not going to spit out answers. It's not going to do your prioritization. What it's going to do is help us think more specifically and intentionally about how we can develop goals and policies that will best serve community, right? And at the same time, remembering the conversation that we just had, which ultimately it's about then the design of the implementation. But what we want to start from is a place that seeks as best we can at a high level to create goals and policies that meet the values that we started this whole process with. So in this first slide, the guiding question is really about understanding who's impacted by an issue or decision, right? Or who's impacted by a goal or a policy. You can fill in the language, right? And that can be positive benefit or negative impact. And so the narrative is really just challenging us to understand how different communities may or may not experience an issue. And the ways that policies, practices, procedures, et cetera, really benefit and burden different populations. And we got to see that very clearly in y'all sharing earlier, right? That we have to understand when we talk about who might be impacted by cold weather events, right? That those impacts may look and feel very differently, even though they're all impacted negatively. And a lot of what I was hearing, the impacts from, Gabriella, your stories around folks just being able to get outside because that's how they might manage, their emotional and mental health well-being, or be able to stay calm in the context of developmental disabilities, or folks that, use a walker to move around, or Laura, your stories of folks who can't access cold weather gear or have risks of walking in cold events where it's dangerous, right? Like, so your stories are already helping to describe, right? How do we understand who's impacted and in what ways? Gabriella, do you want to jump in, please?
Yes, thank you. I want to add something that I totally omitted in my sharing earlier. One of the difficult parts with the hot weather for the families is when they have AC units that go on the window. They hang on the window, and the landlords or apartment managers are not allowing them. Sorry, I need to turn off my camera because my internet is not working right. So they don't allow families to hang those AC units on the windows because they say they are not aesthetic, and they want them to use AC units that have a hose only connected to the window, and to have that, like they have this acrylic transparent material that they request for them to use. They don't allow them to use cardboard nor wood or anything else that is not aesthetic. And so they worry more about the aesthetics of the place than the heat and discomfort that the families are going through. And some of these families have children that are bedridden, and they cannot go outside to like a cooling center or something, because some of these, we call them children, but it's like sometimes they're like 18, 19 or above, you know, and it's not so easy to move them around. So that's a challenge with the hot weather condition, and they need to keep their rooms cool so they don't exacerbate the condition that they have with pain or discomfort. So
Yeah.
sorry I omitted that. Thank you.
No, that's very helpful. And so, you know, when I think about why we ask these type of questions, and I'm trying to respond a little bit on the fly, so hopefully give me some grace, right? So if you think about the idea that you might have a goal of, you know, being, you know, having comfort in your home, or the right to be cool, recognizing if you have a policy that just says, you know, folks should have air conditioners, right? Or better access to air conditioning. Well, that's great in itself, unless you understand that some of those barriers are really related to people's ability to install, or building codes, whatever that is. Right now, we might not get to the policy area, or a policy that specifically addresses that, but being able to name it and contextualize it is really important, right? It's pushing to strive to say, will that policy work in the context of folks that aren't able to, for example, install window units, or they're required to have, you know, certain kind of aesthetics in place in order to do so. So, you know, again, operating on the fly, just trying to, you know, give some life to the example that you're providing, because I think that's the type of story that needs to then inform policy. And I hope, right, that in an example like that, if I ask, then does this policy address the barriers that people experience? If there's a policy that doesn't acknowledge, or doesn't respond to, or doesn't mitigate the barrier that you just described, right, then we have work to do. Does that make sense? Okay. So then the right side, so you can see on the left, what we tried to do is capture, right, asking folks to really think about, right, the physical, environmental, social, financial, cultural, mental health, and spiritual impacts of a policy. Again, I heard a lot of that language in the way that you all and community is already talking about issues, right? This is how it's impacting. These are the ways that it's affecting these parts of my life and experience. And again, I you know, I'm not an expert in this work. What I will say is that the intent of the questions is to try to get to how do we, you know, how do we address barriers for people that are most impacted. So let me pause and say, is there anything coming up for you as you read either the left side or the right side of this slide? And the questions, and when you think about your communities, are there any gaps that would prevent, right? You think about your communities you're working for, like if we were thinking about a goal or a policy and we ask these questions, is there anything missing that you think we need to be able to name in order to make sure your communities are seen in this type of discussion? And I'll look to my colleagues' team. If you have like a policy example that might lend itself really well, we can prompt that. But I really just wanted to start, like, did we get these questions right? Right? If you were in a conversation around goals and policies and you were asked to think about these things, is there anything missing that would say, you know what, if we don't ask this, my community is going to be left out? Monica?
Hi, yes. So with the second one, have we considered the historical or current relationship to the issue / policy for all communities? I just was at a May 23rd lunch and learn that the title was how inequitable housing policies are rooted in myths of white supremacy. And so that that taught me so much. And I just feel that there's so many policies right now that are really bringing us down and communities of color down, and to really have a deep dive into those too. And I can even share this recording because she said to share it out. But it's about really knowing where we're coming from, knowing our history, and being okay, what policies are really inhibiting us from getting there, and are they gonna, mess with us in this planning too? Like, I just don't want there to be someone just like, well, okay, this is great, look at all the things that we've done, but then there's these policies that are not allowing us to do that. And it's like, oh, come on, man, like things have to change. Like, we can't keep on doing the same things thinking that it's going to get us out of these problems. Like, they got us into this mess. And so I just want to make sure that we get the whole picture so that we can actually be making really informed decisions on how, healing the past and transforming the future. So that's what came up to me.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Monica. And a lot of folks talked about housing, right? Like, so the historical context around housing, where it's been built, what resources have been invested. Right? Neighborhood design and experience is certainly shaped by patterns that you're describing, and policies and politics that have led to very different living situations for folks, whether that's access to sidewalks, whether that's tree canopy, right? Fill in the blanks for what that could mean. And so again, for today, like, this is not what we didn't build in for today is like, let's practice this. What I'm asking you all to imagine is if we were to ask these questions, does it reflect kind of what you all shared? And is there anything missing that feels really important? So maybe I'll ask for like affirmation or disagreement, right? So, you can throw it in the chat, looks good, or you can throw in the chat, I have no idea what you're talking about, or you can say, no, I think we need to think about this more. Thanks, Laura. So thank you for folks responding. We can come back to this, right? And I think part of what I'm wanting to imagine, right? So when Dana talked about some of those examples earlier, and we're going to send those goals out, that will be your first chance to start thinking through, okay, let me apply this. How would I think about this goal? Is there a way to change that language, or a policy to change that language, or to think about it so it more directly responds to and is reflective of and doesn't create additional harm or additional barrier? So let's go to the next slide. And very similar, I asked the same question, right? And a lot of this is, if you all remember one of our first conversations, Dana shared a lot of slides. There's a lot of information, but there was a lot of spatially related images, right? Heat maps of vulnerability or risk. And so places of critical importance, right? And I think you all likely know and could probably think of places throughout Clark County where you could identify where there is that risk. And so what I heard from you all really clearly is that, data can be biased, right? Data can be limiting. Data can sometimes make communities invisible. What data we value, what data we don't tend to value in these type of processes is all really important to consider. And so the guidance around what does the data tell us, right? So if you're developing goals or policies, how are we using that data to ensure that we're really extending the benefits to communities that are most at risk or vulnerable or overburdened? And how do we use data to really ensure that we've considered the stories and narratives of folks, right? So recognizing data is an important aspect of understanding who and where impacts occur, and looking at hazard risks. We're looking at data to ensure that we're including story and narrative and context, and ensuring that policy is actually aligned with what community is trying to contribute and what community hopes for. So then the questions, how have community input and priorities been considered? How has community engagement informed policy? What were the demographics, right? We heard some of that from Laura's example earlier. Monica, jump in.
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to also say that we need to have people either be trained to be translators and interpreters and get more support for that. I just feel that maybe it's a fear of language barrier or something, but there needs to be someone that can be there that can help with the different languages that we have, so that language barrier, isn't an issue. I just feel there's so much knowledge out there, and that people just don't have a way to get it out because they're like, who do I talk to and where do I go? And so I just wanted to make that plug in there too. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I'll ask, right, is that a gap in the questions, right? So part of what we're trying to hope for in these type of questions is, maybe that's an additional prompt. We often might say, how have we included or excluded communities, right? In your example, Monica, is if we have not provided opportunities in the native language of folks who are impacted, overburdened, vulnerable, then we've excluded those communities from a process, right? We've excluded those communities from giving voice. And then we can't answer this question with authenticity and integrity, right? How have we included folks if we've excluded them through our own processes? And of course, right, part of the hope here is that by having a group like you all, right, with translated materials, with first language outreach and conversations and community work that you all do, that we're reconciling some of that. But that's part of also what you need to be filtering. How is community being impacted and from who, right? Abby, jump in.
I really like the parts about community engagement informing policy. I was thinking about that on the last slide a little bit with the like historical and current context. Like, are we hearing that from those groups specifically? But one thing that that I thought of while looking at that is not just community engagement, but who's asking those kind of questions. Because I think, it speaks to what we're doing here, but there's a lot of, understandable mistrust from various government and health institutions. And so I think that prioritizing not just any community engagement was done, but who was it done by and who was asking the questions, and was it done in a way where people felt comfortable sharing and wanting to give their input.
Yeah, I thank you for naming that, Abby, and you all know that, and those are pieces, again, capturing it for today around who's asking, right, who's doing that work. And it gets back to what I was reflecting earlier. If it's a bunch of government folks with clipboards, that process may exclude many community members, right? Just kind of pulling off from your example, right? So who's doing the work, in what ways, and where, what type of spaces, right? Having a healing circle and dancing is going to be a very different vibe for community to enter, right? Than filling out an online survey, maybe, right? And for some folks, an online survey might be the most inclusive way to engage them, right? And who's informing that process and ensuring that we're using mechanisms that worked. And ultimately, what this, these questions and the data that we're collecting is meant to do is to try to challenge this process to ensure that we're asking, how is community voice, right? And trying to think very intentionally about community. Again, as I've been using the language, I believe in the statute, and I might be screwing it up, overburdened, vulnerable, at risk, right? And experiencing health disparities, right? How have we ensured that those communities and the data and stories and visions and perspectives have been included in this process? Anna, I see you can't even think to prep for the future because they're too busy trying to survive, right? How do you hold that, right? And what does that mean for our process, right? Like, we can't answer, right? Like, this tool is not going to overcome that reality, but understanding, like, how do you then engage? And I think somebody had said it might have been, Anna, right? Actually, I think it was Rebecca earlier. It was like, I don't remember who said it. one of you said it, right? This is, I haven't even had the time to think about this before. Right? And what a luxury even that was to just be able to sit in a space and think about how I can give to a vision, right? Do I even have the privilege of time to sit, right? And I think, Anna, your comment, right, is heavy, right? How do you prep for the future when you're just busy surviving the day? And how do we incorporate that, right? Like, this is not going to give you an answer. But I hope, and I love Anna your example because it prompts that response. How do we get input from folks? How have we included folks that are so busy trying to survive that they don't have time to take the survey or go to the focus group or show up at the Juneteenth event or come to the fill in the blank? Right? It doesn't answer any of the questions for you, but it helps us think through like, oh, we missed some people. We got to find a different way to engage them. But that's what this is meant to do. Let's challenge our process, right? So I'm going to ask those same questions around anything coming up for you. Is there anything missing? Are there gaps that show up? Monica, jump in.
Yes, just thought, I was like, the big people are too busy and everything, making dinner or taking care of the kids or something. But it's just like, what about going door to door, and talking to people, the ones who want to, but saying that, hey, like a survey, we have this survey to get more of your input. And like, it is like people do respond to financial, like, yay, like if you fill this out, you'll get this, like if you like, this will also be in it because it's like, it's their time, it's their energy. It's that. And so I feel like it needs to be compensated in some sort of way, even with like a $10 Winco card or something, here's some food or $10, Saturday market, card or something where like we actually go door to door. And that people that don't go out and, look at flyers or don't have social media or whatever, like we need to go where they're at. And so that's what comes up to me.
Yeah, I appreciate it, right? And again, this tool and its application is not going to give you the answer to that, right? This tool should help you at any point in this process, and certainly, right, you all are the ones going out there. It should help you understand like what are the barriers to getting the stories and narratives and perspectives and vision from community, right? So it doesn't answer the tactic, Monica, right? For some people, showing up at the door is going to be great. For other folks, it'd be like, get off my yard. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want you coming to my property, right? So
I yelled at the other day for accidentally.
I mean, I just use it as an example, not like to push back on the idea, right? But these are things, again, what we're going to get to a place where what we're asking is, have we heard from the community, right? And that's a big open question. Part of y'all's job, part of this project's job is to say, if the answer is no, then what do we do? And more importantly, if the answer is yes, how has it then shaped the final product, right? That's ultimately the challenge. If we care about folks who are impacted, and we have articulated that in a lot of different ways, including kind of the investment in this group and this process. If we care about what people say, then it needs to somehow show up, right? And that's what we're trying to challenge this process to be reflective of, right? That's what these questions are meant to do. Is with that in mind, is there any gaps? And I'll just ask same thing, if it looks good, just it looks good, but this is our time to be like, well, I would need to ask this like that, or, I don't know that my community would be seen if we just say this. Really trying to identify, are there concerns you all have, while recognizing this is going to be something we're going to have to kind of practice as a group. Yeah, Anna.
Yeah, going back to the same topic regarding communities that are undocumented, that have been told for generations after generations that if they, have anything to do with the government, they might be able, they might get in trouble. So like having those thoughts too. I'm so sorry. Hold. On top of those comments of like, yeah, you know, how are we supposed to think of tomorrow when we barely making it today? So I'm always I always have my community in mind, and I'm gonna be straight up with y'all. I don't have the answer as to how we can make you know, my community more comfortable for them to be able to engage, but that's something that I'm definitely working on because it is important for our voices to be heard as well.
Yeah, thank you for being so honest about that, Anna. I mean, I think that's a really a very real comment, right? And some of you may remember in our discussions coming into this process, I said, you know, what's your comfort level sometimes speaking on behalf of, right? And that may be part of the reality, right, Anna? Like, you all have unique lived experience, professional experience, relational experience that might help address those barriers, right? My community can't show up because of fear, because of risk, because of time, because of trying to survive. But how do you lift up what you know, right? How do we do our best, right? Again, you know, I appreciate just your rawness and your response, Anna. Like, you don't always know how to make that happen. Like, we're not going to necessarily be able to solve for that. But we should be asking, right, did we hear from undocumented people in this process? Have we considered the experiences of undocumented people in our work? And if the answer is an explicit no, then how can we try to, right? But that's, again, it's about the practice of getting to where we're going, and not necessarily like getting everything right. And I think that's just something we all have to kind of hold. We're going to do our best to say yes, to say we have included, we have heard from, it does reflect, right? And knowing that it's about trying to do better, trying to do the best we can. So I'll repeat what Amy just put in the chat. If you're all going to use the chat, please reply to everyone so it's visible for the public. Gabriella, you got it. Monica, some people are not knowledgeable, right? There's lots of barriers, right? So let's go to the next slide. And this is, you know, fundamentally at the end of our work together, what we collectively, and I say we, probably by mistake, but I feel very we with y'all. So at the end of this process, right, as a community, being able to respond to how do we improve and lift up the positive and try to reduce or mitigate the negative. And fundamentally, this is what a tool like an equity lens, an equity environmental justice lens is meant to do. How have we, through asking questions about people's experience and lives and history, by asking questions around, have we heard from the people directly, right? There's old environmental justice adage, community speaks for itself, best protects itself. Have we heard from folks who are most at risk? And ultimately getting to this place where we're trying to get to strategies that distribute benefits in ways that really do try to redress for harm and try to ensure that policies will work across all of our communities in Clark County. And the question, right, what are the ways that we could improve this policy, right, enhance the positive or reduce the negative, asking people also to think about, does it address those barriers? And y'all have named a bunch of them tonight. And if not, then can we do anything to address them? Right? Does a policy build capacity or increase trust? Are there parts of the policy that can help heal communities that experience harm or experience trauma? Right? And what does that look like? Right? These are questions, you know, language that you all have certainly used. So I'll again kind of pause with that. Gabriella, I'll start with you. I think Monica, you've kicked us off the last time. Gabriella, jump in.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that, well, first of all, I posted my comments for everybody to see. And I just wanted to say that the county made a brilliant move by bringing, not because I'm here, but because all the group of people that are here, community-based organizations that have the trust report with our marginalized communities to give this feedback. And I think this is very important because even with us having that report with our BIPOC community, people with disabilities, undocumented and whatnot, unhoused, low income, you name it. Even with that, it is difficult to obtain some of that information, maybe because time issues, I don't know, constraints in so many other ways. So so I think having the CBOs participating in this work to reach out to the community was the best way to do it, because if not, our communities wouldn't be heard at all whatsoever, because it's not very likely they will go into a link posted by the county and say like, hey, give us your feedback, and just wait for somebody to say something. And so thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to do this work and to reach out to the community. And even though we're facing challenges, probably that was the best way for this common research to be done. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Gabriella. Monica, I'm going to come back to you. Almendra, we haven't heard from you in a while. Please jump in.
I also wanted to, I was agreeing with Gabby. Just thank you for your support. And, you know, as we also try to work on creating the safe spaces for our communities, I'm kind of, again, reflecting on my own personal experience of just in general, I think other people can also maybe feel the same way, but a lot of our communities that migrate to the US, they come with that, you know, American dream. And at least for my family, like we came here and like the land was kind of a commodity. And so we come with that kind of like, we sometimes feel unwelcomed in spaces, and the next generation, we're trying to break that kind of like past trauma or experiences. And so I don't know, it's just moving forward from like thinking, from coming here and thinking we're just working the land as commodity to actually working the land in community, so that, you know, it's, you know, a space where we all grow together. And just, you know, how do we reimagine a sustainable and new American dream, I guess, is kind of the next phase that we're all kind of trying to figure out.
Yeah, that was really beautifully said, right? Moving kind of from commodity to community. And again, I mean, that's a frame to, as you all kind of get the, you know, some of these drafts, goals and policies, a frame to really look through, right? How are we not just seeing kind of the labor as commodity, but the labor as community, the labor as love, as the labor as connection, the labor as healing, the connection to, you know, all the things that you just named and some of your colleagues have said. Monica, jump in.
Yes, thank you. And so let's see, I wanted to start out with we need to change the narrative. There's been this false belief of hierarchy of human value for ever since people came over and migrated over from Europe and took over the land. They did it with the Indian Removal Act. They did it with eugenics, and then they made the people that were originally here the I know, baby. It is off. And they made them go to Mexico. And then when they came back, they were illegal. And so it's just that whole distrust. Hey, baby, I know. Go with daddy. Okay. And so it took me till I was in my early 30s to feel like my voice and my thoughts and me mattered, and that and that I was intelligent enough to be in spaces. It took me a lot of work to get there. And so I just feel that people, like we were saying, they don't trust that the white man or the woman or whatever is going to listen. And so there needs to be a change in narrative. We need to do it. Like, we need to have that in front of our minds. Like, we need to call it out, call it like it is, and just be like, hey, you're in a safe space. And then also there needs to be more ways to connect with, like, hey, your comments are here, community, but then also it's going to go to the planning commission. You can make comments there. It's going to go to the county council. Like, there needs to be a way to do the outreach to say you can be involved in the process throughout. Like, if you wanted to say something and you didn't, here's another avenue you can say it. Or it's just to have multiple ways for people to engage and be like, hey, I didn't get to say when I wanted to say it, but now I can at the planning commission or at the county council. But then also, make sure that we continue to reach out and not just be like, okay, thanks for your comments, now bye. Like, have that connection with people. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. Almendra, is that an old hand or a new hand?
Sorry.
Oh, thank you. Well, I appreciate the feedback. There's a couple things that I want to come back to. So one, we'll make sure you all get some more time and space with this. And as this process unfolds, I guess what I'll ask is that we enter in good faith and with grace to ourselves and each other, to say how can we use this in the most efficient and effective way possible to ensure that we're doing our due diligence. I also just wanted to come back to you. There's been a number of comments in the chat. Some of it may live outside of this meeting, but I think your last piece, and maybe it's for our planners in the room, this SEPA State Environmental Policy Act, right? SEPA, State Environmental Policy Act, right? If I interpret what you're putting, it's a link to say that SEPA is required in the adoption of comprehensive planning. And so I guess, like, can someone try to tie this together? And then, Jude, it might be an offline conversation, but I don't want to lose it, because I think it'll be helpful for the group to understand, right, the relationship of that type of analysis that's required for SEPA compliance and the work that is happening with the comprehensive plan and the climate element and this body. And Jenna, you might have answered some of this in the chat, but I'm not tracking everything. So Jude, did you want to give additional context first before I ask that?
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing it as an offline thing to do outside because it's due like in 2 days.
Okay.
Comments and so I think that, our comments and all these conversations here matter to that scoping, that these issues should be analyzed. And with respect to the alternatives, which we don't even know what they are at this point, but the first alternative will be no action, which is the plan we don't want because it's the one we have, that needs to be updated with respect to climate resiliency and social justice. And so it's kind of like indicative of processes that it would be separated, and it's kind of bothering me. I'm sorry. That our comments here would not be part of that scoping unless there's a blanket way to say that, or everybody spends some time they don't really have to like submit them over there in the other portal, just to make sure that they're going to be covered, because it's a legal, it's a policy act. So it's a legal enforcement document, analysis document that's going to analyze the update plan that we haven't even, finished, working on, right? So we're in this process. And so it's not the final opportunity to have input.
Yeah.
But the issues need to be on the list in order for them to be included in the analysis.
That's super helpful, Jude, and thank you for just naming it. I don't know how much, well, I'll speak for myself. I'm not a planning and policy expert, but Jenna and team, right? So if I hear you correctly, Jude, it's the June 5th deadline then is really comments on the scoping for SEPA. And then there's further process that would actually analyze based on that scope before the comprehensive plan or growth management plans adopted, right? There's a separate SEPA analysis. So Jenna, if I hear you, Jude, the ask is like, we're having this whole conversation about environmental or equity and environmental justice lens. There's content in here that could benefit by being included in the scope for a SEPA analysis. That's what I'm hearing, Jude. And so I guess, Jenna or team, is there a mechanism, right? And I think, Jude, I heard a proposal to say, like, we're collectively saying this should be included as public comment as part of scoping. But Jenna, can you help connect the dots for me, please, and for the group?
Yeah, no, I think, so one of our challenges as staff is we can't comment on your behalf for something like this. So but you can ask me the question and I can sort of coach you, right? Somebody who's a member of the public, right, should submit a comment that's part of the SEPA EIS process. And if you, I think if I'm understanding what you're saying, yeah, if you make a comment around, if it's the equity lens you want to highlight or other pieces of this group's work so far that you want to highlight, put it in the comment so that it gets submitted, if that makes sense. So someone just needs to submit the comment to say that. So I can't submit comments for you all, but if someone was willing to do that on behalf of the group, right, I think that would be fine.
Can I connect it to some of our earlier conversations procedurally, right? So Jude, I'll just use your name for the moment, right? If a member like Jude was to draft comment that connected the work that we have just done over the last 2 meetings on the equity and environmental justice lens, shared it with the Clark County team for distribution, like to the EJC members, is that an effective way to then get the broader group to have the opportunity to submit individual comments based on that? Like, how would you mechanically do it, right? I don't know if it's like a vote of this group to kind of submit a public comment. So I guess I'm wondering, Jen, is it up to each individual to do that alone, or is there a procedure that if someone did submit, from their perspective as a member of the public, shared it with Clark County, and you distributed to EJC members for them to submit as individuals? Is that rather than emailing everybody? I guess I'm trying to find, like, is there a mechanical way to make that happen?
Right, to do it, right. So if anyone individually submits, it goes in, right? So, and it gets captured as part of the EIS comments. So I think then what you're suggesting is there then sort of their next step to somehow collect, like, how do you bring in the collective of this group into there?
I think it's really like, it would be inappropriate then to share an email to everyone around the group because of the public meeting laws, right? That says, hey, I drafted this comment related to our work as an EJC that I'm submitting as a scoping comment. I guess I'm just curious, like, if I'll just use Jude's name. If Jude was to send that to you to say, here's my draft comment that I would like to have some shared with the EJC, is that a way to get it to everyone without getting out of the boundaries?
Yes, so I can forward, and it could be, a comment that people are then welcome to just, submit them, right? Like, I think that's the chat, right? Like, that other people could also copy and paste, could
Similar
use
to a lot of
or something
organizations,
like that,
right?
or
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, there's so two things. So one, I'll just leave that at that, right? So Jude, I appreciate you naming it, right? It does feel like a really important part of this overall process, even if it's not very explicit to the work that the EJC is doing at this moment. But team, I guess we can also then maybe circle in the background to make sure we're not missing some of these opportunities, at least as part of the project updates or announcements. So we're giving EJC members the opportunity to influence other kind of parallel parts of this process. So Jude, I know you put a number of things in the chat. I've been trying to track it while leading the conversation. Yeah, okay. Why don't we I mean, what I think I heard is just a mechanism. Yes, you can all submit individually. Two, you can, if you draft a comment that you would like to share with EJC members, you can send it through Clark County and they'll distribute to members who then can choose to submit as individuals. Is that right? Jenna, correct me if I said anything outside of bounds.
Right. I think that's right. And I'm not sure if that's too complicated even in 2 days. And I think Jude's suggestion is right, that people submit individually on behalf of their own organizations.
And you can reference.
And you can reference EJC meetings or content that's come in the meeting in your comment is a good way, I think, to pull it in.
Okay, and then the other commitment we'll just make is project team, we'll work on the back end to try to figure out, is there more kind of explicit ways to ensure that the EJC members have notification at least of opportunities that are emerging to inform some of these other parts of the process. And Jude, thank you. I'm not a planning person, so I appreciate you just naming some of these intersections. And it is important, right? If you know, each step of this overall work is important overall. So thank you, and thanks for working through my mumbling and jumbling to get to resolution. So with that, I do want to open it up for public comment. I appreciate folks. You have the slide deck, you have the material. So if there's other thoughts that emerge as you kind of sit with this conversation, please let me know. But ultimately, it's going to be our collective obligation to try to give this life as we do the work together. Right now, it's words on a page informed by our best thinking, and we're going to have to turn it into meaning in the way that we practice. So I do want to offer, we create space at every meeting for public comment. So we can pull up the public, it's already there right in front of my face. So if you are in the audience and would like to offer public input to this group, we'll ask you to raise your hand and we'll promote you to a panelist. You get 3 minutes to speak. I don't see too many people in the audience, so I'll just last call for public comment. You raise your hand. Yep, Heather, let's promote Heather. So when making public comment, please say your name. You get 3 minutes to offer input to the group. So please respect that time so I don't have to try to be rude and cut you off. Focus on substance relative to the group, be respectful. And the floor is yours, Heather, welcome back.
Thank you. I just want to say how grateful I am to Jude for hanging in there about trying to create specificity.
That's it.
The specifics around how the environmental justice, how the climate impact and environmental justice work that's being done for the climate element can actually become part of the EIS scoping document. I've been concerned about that myself, that these two important aspects of comp planning were not integrated when they actually need to be integrated. So I just want to thank Jude for, and you, Ben, and Jenna for hanging in there today through what it's going to take to get the work of this environmental justice committee integrated into the EIS scoping document. That's a really important integration that needs to happen and that needs to continue. So I just want to commend you all on that. It was great progress in that regard today. And so thank you.
Well, thank you and appreciate the encouragement. We will hang in, we will keep pushing. So we appreciate the recognition and acknowledgement and appreciate your attention and participation. So thank you, Heather. With that, we have a couple in our last number of minutes. So we do want to talk about scheduling. So I know Jenna mentioned this earlier in the meeting. Right now, we are scheduled for July 1st. We were curious if July 8th, I know we think we heard from maybe one or two people that might have a conflict, but maybe if we can do I don't know how to best do this. If July 1st works, maybe you can put a thumbs up or raise your hand if July 1st works. Actually, we put your hands in the chats or we'll click the button. I know Laura and Monica, you're doing a good job, but this will be easier to count. So this is July 1st. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. July, Lika, Min, 1, 2, 3. Everybody's moving. Every time a hand goes up, everybody moves around. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Lika, yes, July 1st. Almandra, Jude, Donnie, I see your thumbs up. Okay. What about July 8th? So July 1st seems to work for almost everybody. Jude, any date works. So this is for July 8th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it looks like less for July 8th. So July 1st works for folks. All right, Clark County folks, did we miss anything? It looks like July 1st is the date. Okay. I'll be calling in from a hotel, but I'll be there. And I'll be with my smile on, getting ready for my week.
I'll be
Okay.
connecting from Seattle, but the 1st is best. Thank you.
Okay. We'll all make our sacrifices, be wherever we are to come into community together and be with each other. I love it. Okay, so we will, it should be already on your calendar for July 1st, right? So there's no changes. We just wanted to make sure. I know there's, Laura, I see your comment. I know there was a couple folks where it didn't work. Just some of us making sure with the holiday coming up that week that it was going to still work for folks. Okay, so for next steps, Min, is that that's like when you can make the meeting hand, or is that a question?
The meeting hand, so.
Okay, thank you. Good to hear you anyways. So our next meeting then will be July 1. I guess I have a slide I should pay attention to. So we'll ask for your feedback by next Monday on the phase 2 engagement questions. I think there's some follow-up around the QR code, so we'll make sure that all happens from the beginning of the meeting, but any feedback, please get that back by June 10th. And I think it was June 21st, Jenna, was the turnaround on your end? Is that what you said?
Yeah, by the 21st, I would expect to have all the translations done.
Okay, so make sure you get your feedback by June 10th. Give Clark County folks time to turn that around. Review work plan tasks for May and June. You all know, hopefully by now, who you can connect with for any support, resources, needs to complete tasks you have. Don't forget to get your invoices in, go get paid. And am I missing anything else? Okay, we'll send some follow-up information. Again, you'll have the draft lens that we talked through today. So we'll be asking for some feedback on the policies. Our next meeting will be July 1st. The webpage, as always, is on the page. and Lauren, Amy, Jenna for invoicing. All other questions, reach out to Nicole. No, I'm just kidding. Me or Nicole. And with that, we are at 6:23. Gabriella, oh, sorry, jump in. Where's that an old hand?
No, it's a new hand.
Okay, jump in.
I just thought about something because of the public comment on the comp plan. I wonder, so maybe if Jana or one of the organizers get back to me about this. I'm part of the comp plan, so I don't know if I can make a public comment because I'm a comp plan with the county and I'm doing this as well. So I don't know if I can make that public comment for the work. So please let me know. I'll be happy to.
Is a question around conflict of interest, Gabrielle? Like if you're under contract or doing this work?
No, it's about because so for the public comment, I just thought about it. I kept thinking about it. If because I'm doing work with the county for the comp plan to reach out to underserved communities.
Yeah.
Undocumented with intellectual and mental disabilities. So I wonder if I can make the public comment for the comp plan. That was just my question.
I don't think there's any prohibition. I can't think of one. Jenna, is there any reason?
Yeah, I agree. Gabriella, I think there's no problem with you submitting comments as a member of the public. Yeah.
Okay.
What
Thank
you-
you. I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah, no, that's good. What you can't do, right, and clarify if I'm wrong, you cannot submit on behalf of the Environmental Justice Coalition, right? So even if you identify your membership on it, you cannot speak for the group, right? That's an accurate statement. So
Okay. Thank you.
Are we done?
yeah. Oh. I'm not
I
sure.
said, yeah, thank you. I don't know what that was, but yeah, thank you.
Okay, Lika, did you have something you were adding?
No, I'm sorry. It was an accident. My family's here.
That's
I'm at
okay. Well, we say hi to them. We welcome families. Okay, well, with that, you get, oh yeah, there you go. Hi, family. Thanks for giving us, some of your family for the evening. All right, well, with that, we're 5 minutes early. Much love. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for the great conversation. See ya.